Hello, everybody. This is Roger Hanson back with another stream for my storyteller topic. And today I have a really good story that I want to present. The last time I did a little bit about my plot for the story I'm doing, but today I have somebody here who's going to do or tell you his own story, and it's a lead in. And I've talked to this guy for a uh, for another I guess you could say another stream before this, and the stuff that he said was really interesting, and it was something that caught my curiosity, so I wanted to bring him back so that he could tell his story. Now, for this entire hour, it's going to be designated to him just telling his story, or at least as close to an hour, however long he wants to do it. If it takes 2 hours, it's fine. It's perfectly fine. And with that being said, I'm going to ask everybody that if anybody does join the stream, please remain silent until he's done with his story. And if he chooses to do questions and answers, that's completely up to him. That's if he wants to do it. So, with that being said, I am going to introduce him, and I might get this wrong. He just told me it too. It's Pecos Dave.
Pecos.
Pecos Dave.
Yes.
And with that, I'm going to let him come in and talk a little bit about himself and go from there. So, turn it over to you, Dave.
All right. This is completely unscripted. I haven't actually sat down and thought about what I was going to say or anything along those lines, but we did have an interesting show a few days back, and I was asked back over here. I guess I do have sort of an interesting story to tell, and I can't tell all of it for various reasons, but I am in so many ways one of the most mundane people you'll ever meet. And in others, people don't believe me when I tell my story because it seems so outlandish. And it's really not as outlandish as most people think. I'm one of those people that when I decide to do something, I just go and do it. And apparently that's worked out for me. I've never made it rich or anything. When I've set out for money, I'm not someone who just, falls into a pile of cash. But when I want to accomplish something, I tend to do it. In many ways, I started out with a handicap when it came to moving forward in life. One of the reasons, my username that I go by, Pecosdave. See, back in 1996, when I was trying to come up with an internet handle, there was still some good one word ones left that you could use, but everything I tried to use to establish an email address was taken. And since I was from the town of Pecos and there was the tall tale of Pecos Bill, it's like, you know what? He can call himself Pecos Bill and he's not even from there. I'm going to be Pecos Dave. And for the most part, I've had an exclusive on that name. A few other people want it. Unfortunately, on Sony, a couple of gambling sites, and a porn king all adopted the name. And I'm telling you, I definitely won the porn king because if I'd have done that, I'd have used a name my grandma didn't know. But I've mostly stuck with it just because of the tall tale, and I get to keep it all to myself. So, yeah, let me bring up the chat. I was looking at the Minds chat, but yeah, it occurs to me I need to actually look at the Jitsi chat too. There we go. Okay, so I've been a Texan almost all my life. Was actually kind of conceived over in Pecos, but I was born on the east side of the state. And when I was about 3 or 4 years old, my parents moved back to Pecos, and I grew up there. And that was the handicap I was talking about. Most of the people around Houston, where I live now, don't comprehend what I mean when I say I'm from a small town. He said, like Humble? Oh, no. A small town around Houston is still pretty much attached to Houston. You get city things. I was out in the middle of the desert. I decided when I was quite young that I really liked technology and electronics, and I really wanted to go that direction. And that was one of the worst places to be if that's what you were into. If your parents were, yeah, I kind of grew up on the poor side. And my parents' attitude towards electronics, computers, was we didn't have them when we were kids. You don't need one now. So I actually got a late start in the IT industry. Here I was when I went to my tech school, surrounded by people who've been playing with computers since they were the age of 4. And I got my equivalent to an 8088 in about 1995. So, yeah, I started on DOS good right before I graduated. But I picked it up fast and enjoyed it. It was a rough town to grow up in. When I was growing up there, I was a minority. You know, most people say, oh, white people aren't minorities in the United States. Well, you can be a regional minority. The town I was in was about 87% Mexican. And it wasn't, the city people. It was the broke people from near the border who came from the small villages that didn't have a pot to piss in. And they were the ones who came across, sat down and said, give me welfare. And I learned a bad way of looking at these people because of where I grew up. After I moved to the larger cities, I met a lot of immigrants from Mexico that are some of the best people I've ever been around. But out where I grew up, it was a welfare city. It really was. It's a major hub of human trafficking and drug trafficking, because it sits where 2 interstates fork near the border. And when the sheriff that had been paid off, there was one sheriff the whole time I was growing up there. And he finally died, 2000 or so after I moved away. They had to send in a federal task force to help the local police department bring the town back into order, because once the new sheriff came in and actually tried to enforce laws that the previous sheriff had been paid off about, criminals started rioting, and the cops and sheriff's department couldn't keep them in mind. So yeah, they sent in a federal task force to help clean my town up. So I've got scars on my knuckles. Fighting. If you weren't a wimp and you weren't part of one of the gangs, you had to fight because somebody had to prove themselves, and you were just the target. And I was a major target because I wasn't in the gang. I worked on a ranch on occasion, but I wasn't one of the cowboys. I wasn't one of the shit kickers. Didn't want to be. I'd work cattle all day, work on the fences, whatever, but I wasn't going to join their culture. I'll put on boots and a hat now, but that's not because of shit kicker culture. It's just not what I wanted to be. So, I was out of there less than 2 weeks after graduating high school, and I moved to Phoenix for a year and a half. That was an interesting time in history, and I'm not going to talk about all my personal ins and outs there, but I went to a school called High Tech Institute that doesn't exist anymore. When Obama started his for-profit college thing, where the saying for-profit college became a dirty word, my school didn't survive that. They cut off all federal funding to those types of tech schools, and it just didn't survive. Last I checked, it was beauty college now. Used to it was an architecture and electronics school, where I learned basic electronics. They taught basic computing, but I pretty much had the DOS end of that mastered in Windows 2. By the way, I was an early adopter of hating Windows. I didn't have anything else to fill in the blank with. But when I learned I could start a computer that launched Windows 3.1 with an auto exec, and I could exit to play Doom and it ran like crap, but if I took Windows out of the auto exec and it never loaded Windows and Doom ran great, I learned to hate Windows. So when, let's see, he said turning in. Oh, okay, no. Thought somebody was asking about something else. But yeah, I learned to hate Windows early on. I learned ICON stands for Idiots Can Operate Now. And I embraced the command line from early on. But back then, GUI sucked anyway, right? It wasn't until Windows 95 really took hold that people were bound to a GUI anyway. But no, while I was out there, I started out as a security guard. And this is relevant to the last interview that I was a part of. While I was a security guard, I spent a lot of time just hanging out in front of a Bash's grocery store or guarding a big old pile of wood. But there was one particular site that I kind of liked. There was a school. It was just on the edge of Scottsdale. And it was kind of up in a mountain peak. There was like multiple, it was kind of like a mountain valley peak area. It was a real interesting place. The school didn't have hallways. All the classes opened to the outside. And there was a big soccer field. And usually about 4 a.m. I'd go take a break. I'd sit down in the soccer field. I'd look up at the stars, and they were beautiful. The mountain peaks blocked out all the light from the surrounding cities, and you could really see the stars well. And by the way, I couldn't remember the name of this school to save my life, because this was what? This was 1996. 97 is when I actually started. Or the end of 96 is when I got into electronics. So there was a star that I found. And this star would rotate colors as I watched it. It would go like red, green, blue, yellow. It was just keep cycling. And I figured out how to find it. And I would sit there and I'd look at that star for about 15, 20 minutes. And I'd start walking around the school again. One particular night, and this is the incident that I talked about in the previous show where I saw something that defied the laws of physics. I looked up to find that star, and I found another star zigzagging in the area. And it did about 3 or 4 zigzags. It was just kind of doing like this real slow. If y'all can see the camera, I don't know if you can. Then it hit the end of one, and it immediately arced off back the direction from which it came in an arc, and it was out of sight. It's like the Enterprise going, now more like Star Wars when they start to go into hyperspace while they're in a battle or whatever. They just hit the hyperspace. It was like that curve, and it was gone. It looked like a star. So I tell people, yeah, I've had a UFO sighting simply because nothing turns around nothing turns around that fast and takes off so fast you can't see it in under a second. It isn't defying the laws of physics as we know it. So that was my minimal personal encounter. Basically nothing, but it was a star accelerating. But working security was pretty rough. My share of the week rent was like $420 a month at the time, and I made like $390 every 2 weeks. I was barely making it. I graduated high school at just a slightly overweight 220. I was built well. And I went back to visit at Christmas at 175. So, yeah, I was kind of starving when I was out there doing that. Um, my first computer related job is interesting. If you'll remember, there was a period of time after Apple fired Steve Jobs. And during this time, they were practically giving computers away to certain schools. They came out with the Apple Newton, and they were doing really poorly as a company. Nobody was buying Macs at the time. They did start to come out, I think. No, this was before that time. But the Macs weren't doing well. And Apple of that era was still using Motorola processors. And they did a contract to let Motorola manufacture Mac compatible computers. And I was actually on an assembly line in Tempe building Mac clones. I was the guy who put the motherboards in and connected all little wires and did them up in a little bow. Not going to comment about how poorly the chassis were made, but they were Power PCs from the 1996, early 1997 era. And yeah, I made Mac clones. And it was around that time they rehired Steve Jobs, and I lost my job because he said no more clones. So yeah, I lost my job. I legitimately lost my job to Steve Jobs and Barack Obama over the course of my lifetime. So not many people can say that. But after I quit there, I went into manufacturing and I did automation. Fresh out of school, I have ambition, but I'm still running low on talent. I just haven't been out there doing it long enough to have the talent. So I originally was doing panels for automation, and I was pretty slow at it, and I wasn't the best about judging my wire sizes on down the line. But I actually had a lot of fun doing that, and I went on a couple of installs. After I'd been there long enough, after I graduated from my school, they moved me over to the engineering department. And I started building the consoles for the sorting system, which was all building PCs. And I got to actually go to bulk mail centers and install them, which was a very fun job. I had a lot of fun there, loved my coworkers. The company wasn't necessarily the fairest all the way around. And they kind of pissed me off, so I quit over something to do with Christmas. And my family, I actually moved back in with my parents. And what I did was I was there for 3 days. I had some relatives find me a job. My parents still lived in Pecos at the time. My great aunt found me a possible position in Houston. So I left my dog and my stuff at my parents' house, drove to Houston, did the interview, got the job, drove back to Pecos. And mind you, okay, I'll tell you about this. Pecos is about the halfway point. My parents were so happy I was back in Texas. I was so much closer, and I wasn't way out there in Phoenix where nobody knew where I was, just off by myself in Phoenix. Yeah, you're back in Texas. I got on MapQuest at the time, and while my family was celebrating how much closer I was, I compared my distance between moving to Pasadena, Texas, just south of Houston, where I lived uh, almost in Chandler, Arizona. I was 30 miles closer when I was in Houston when I was out there in Arizona. But they were so happy because I had family around, so that's cool. And I've kind of been stuck here ever since. My first job here in Houston was nothing to write home about. I wasn't really ready for it yet. I was still young. It was kind of a company representative tech position. I went out to client locations that were doctors' offices, lawyers' offices, a lot of gas refineries. It didn't matter. Anybody that had a computer network and wasn't really big enough to have their own IT team. And at that time, I specialized in Novell. That's what I learned at my school. Loved NetWare 3 and 4. I honestly did better with NetWare 3. 4, I wrapped my head around great. I just like the old bindery setup, but I did get better with 4. And then 5 came along before the company for the next step. The next step is what's important. We got to get Y2K was closing in, and big companies were spending lots of money to make sure they were going to be Y2K compliant. Little companies batten down the hatches. We're not going to spend any money on these computers if they're all going to break in a year and a half anyway. So yeah, we're not going to dump any money into this. We'll just wait to see what happens. And the company started to go out of business. And it's because we dealt with smaller clients. We did have a little bit going on, but what we did was we got together with our client that was a beeper cell phone company. They did Primeco phones, if anyone remembers Primeco. So they were our client, we were theirs. We got together and we started an internet service. And this was a big deal to me. I was there at an upstart on the ground floor, and I built some of the original servers while I was still at the old company, and we were getting it off the ground. And this eventually became the largest local ISP in the United States. So, yeah, we were the biggest of the little guys, is what it boils down to. And made a lot of great friends there. As a matter of fact, I work with one of my old coworkers from there now. He sits 3 desks that way. I didn't know him too well when we worked there. When he first got hired, I was on the night shift and he was on the evening shift, but I did meet him. So when he first got hired at this company, I kept looking at him like, I know this guy. I know this guy. And I showed him a picture of all my nerd buds from a wedding, and he pointed at 3 of them that he knew. So, and that's how we put it together, where we knew each other from. But it was a big deal. I actually had the potential to become a millionaire off of that. I got completely screwed over. Turns out, sometimes if you're too good at what you do, you don't get to stay at the top of the ladder. I was so good at supporting customers and training techs that even though I was technically upper echelon of the company when we started, they hired people to replace me, not because I didn't perform well, but because they didn't know what they'd do without me. So I kind of got stomped down the ladder there. I stuck around way too long. But somebody finally did pull me out of there to go help support gas stations, and did earth stations that, satellite support. Took care of gas stations all over the U.S., but my support of the satellites and communications is what got me in the door at NASA. I spent nearly 8 years there. I think that is part of what everyone wanted me to talk about, was my time there. I have to say, I didn't want to stay there as long as I did, and I wanted to stay longer than I did at both at the same time. For legal reasons that I'm still having to deal with, I'm not going to get into too much detail, but a court psychiatrist declared that since I'd changed so many jobs, I must be unstable. And considering I was still in my 20s and in the tech field, and I'd hold a job 2 to 3 years at a time, I was actually doing exactly what I was supposed to. In the tech field, if you stay at a job more than a couple of years, you're not really moving up anymore. I've been here for 5, but I stayed at NASA specifically to keep a court psychiatrist happy when it came to dealing with my daughter in the custody situation. And there's worse places to be. I got to work with Fred Hayes on occasion, and he would talk about plane incidences. He would talk about, going around the moon in Apollo 13. I got to work with Gene Kranz on occasion. He liked to talk about the Apollo 13 movie quite a bit and what was accurate about it and what wasn't. And, dealing with everyone on set, he really liked to talk about that. He talked about making the movie almost as much as he did the actual Apollo 13, because he would tell you what was real and what was made up for the movie. It was great working with Fred Hayes. And as far as I was concerned, a lot of my coworkers, there were several of them there that had been there for over 40 years when I got hired. I liked listening to the stories from my coworkers as much as I did, the big guys I just mentioned. I don't even know if this particular guy's alive anymore, but I got a story that'll put FedEx and UPS to shame. You know how it is when you start talking to management and they ignore you. It's like they were decommissioning a system, but they still had some of the racks in use during the early shuttle days. And they decommissioned the racks and they sent them off to another space center. The whole time my coworker's like, you need to keep a few of these here in case we need a spare off of them until we get the rest of them decommissioned. Well, they didn't listen to him, and what is it? There's a space center up in Kearney, I think, up in New Jersey or somewhere in that area. And the racks were up there, and they had one of the cards go out right before a launch. And they asked the guy, do you know where one of these cards, how to find one of these cards? He said, yes. He told him the rack number and exactly which slot it was in, how to count over, and exactly how to locate the card they needed. They sent an astronaut in a T-38 Talon to go get that card and fly it back to Houston. So, delivery by T-38 Talon. I don't think UPS or FedEx can touch that story. They had a card there back within a few hours and ready to launch. His shuttle went up on time. Unfortunately, that's a secondhand story. I didn't experience that particular one myself. But typical government job. Way too many politics being played. I got a lot of cool stuff done. I rebuilt multiple flight control rooms, and I had my parts in that. It's mostly running cables under the floor, putting equipment in, wiring it in, tying it up. In my case, I tend to be a natural with working machinery, so I was up on the lifts a lot. So I did a lot of projector hanging. My actual job function there was communications, and I did a lot of LVDS wiring, twin X cables and twin axe connectors, mil spec that most people had never heard of. And that was my official job, but I helped out the video group and the audio group. I helped to change the space over from Divas to Device. And if you look at any of the pictures of the control rooms, what that is, the little communications terminals on each side, I helped do that changeover. Um, there's been a lot done since I've been gone. So if I looked at pictures of the Space Center now, there'd be stuff I just wouldn't identify. It has been a while. But no, shortly before, and this is getting personal again, I can share a little personal stuff. Shortly before I worked at NASA, I lived with my grandparents for a couple of years. When I lost my job supporting the gas stations, Shell in Texaco, where I told you I supported the Earth stations, I spent a little over 2 years not being able to nail down a solid job. And I took care of some power plants. I converted power plants from token ring to Ethernet. I took care of other gas companies. I worked with ConocoPhillips and Murphy, and it was mostly like Conoco. I took them off of satellite and put them on DSL. Sounds funny to say it now, but no, mostly communications upgrades. Murphy, I was just upgrading their registers. ExxonMobil, I spent some time there, and the Gestapo runs that place. I don't ever want to go back to, I've got an incoming. Let me put you on mute.
As we go through the interview, we're going to have times where he'll have to take some pauses, so be patient. And if he can come back and finish his story, that's fine. If not, we can schedule it for another time. But we were discussing this before the stream started, so if you guys want to return, it all depends on what happens with him, but I'd like to remind everybody too that if you come in, you're more than welcome to come in, but if you do come into the Jitsi, please remain silent, and after he's done with his story, then you can do it.
So that was my work on call phone, so it was one I had to answer. And that was one of those where they make up a name and ask if he's there. The purpose of the call, it's debt settlement. Do you have debt? I told him my ass was mortgaged and I walked funny without it. It would really help me if you could help get my ass out of hawk. But, yeah, I get a lot of those trash calls, unfortunately, with the company phone. And, where was I? I was talking about living with my grandparents. I got very fat. Granny fed me well, and Grandpa insisted that I ate. So when I got hired there, I was at a weight extreme. I'd made it up to about 280 pounds while I was there, and I just wasn't happy with it anymore. When I was a kid in Pecos, I got to be known as the kid who rode his bike to church. I loved to ride my BMX. I'd go all over town on it, and I had incredibly large leg muscles. Like I couldn't even wear relaxed fit pants. I had to get the full on ultra relaxed, at the time period gangster jeans, or I couldn't put them on over my legs. And I kept that muscle, but I still got incredibly fat. So it was weird. I was 280 pounds, but I could still do forward handsprings. And I could still do more push-ups than my coworkers who looked like they were fit. But I wanted to address it, so I decided to get back into bicycles. And I went over to Webster Bicycle, and I got myself a 24-inch BMX because My previous bike was stolen. It was too small for me anyway. Got a 24-inch BMX, and I owned it all of about 2.5 weeks before Hurricane Ike came and put 4.5 feet of water in my rent house. So, yeah, my bike floated around the house by its tires. It was in a completely different spot than where I left it when I got home. But I was actually able to rescue it. I hosed it down and what have you. But I got serious about biking when I was there, and it totally worked. One of the best things about working at NASA was they had showers on campus you could use, and yeah, I could totally ride a bike there, take a shower, and go into the shop with water still kind of in my ears. You know how it takes a little while for that to clear out. I loved it, and it made it very convenient. I had a hard time. I've usually had a hard time working out just to work out, but if I can make it practical, like I'm going somewhere or I'm doing something, I can do it all day long. So I was in the best shape of my life about the time they laid me off. Um, I still hadn't gotten down to my ideal weight yet, but my legs were rock hard. I felt great, and yeah, I was in the best shape of my life. I've tried really hard to go back there on occasion, not for pay or anything, but because hell, I was going to live further away and bike further. I kind of missed that. And, uh, no, I know I'm talking to you mostly about career stuff, but a lot of the personal stuff I unfortunately do have to leave out just because, uh, you know, custody struggles. I'm not the divorcing type of person, and I'm starting to go through my second one now. And unfortunately, I think I married children. They were adults, but I married children, and you know, I'm part of that. I've gotten wrapped up in part of that American woman mentality, and I thought I chose well the second time, but she's recently told me otherwise. So it's rough, and I'm about to go through another custody battle for my boys. My boys are wonderful. I'm a little bit on the autism spectrum, and I think I was one of the early people to get it from the what the MMR vax. I I've always had social issues because of it, and it took a long time. But when I was in the fifth grade, I was at a very, very low point in my life. And I always paid attention in Sunday school, and I was good with that. And I prayed a prayer to God to get wisdom like Solomon. I flat said, I don't care if I'm never rich. I just want to be wise. I want to know how to get myself out of this social rut that I'm in. Remember, I told you it was a rough place. It wasn't a place you wanted to have this kind of problem because the school didn't identify it properly yet. Anyone who was a little bit off was just labeled dyslexic, and they tried to teach them how to read. So the school recognized I had a problem. And even though I was in the fifth grade reading on a college level, they put me in a class to teach me how to read. And it didn't go over well. But yeah, they just had me completely misidentified, and I kind of threw a fit till I got out of the class. I know that school does great now because I do have a nephew that had some issues kind of like mine, and they did a lot to help him. So I'm glad a lot has changed in the last 20 years. But yeah, they totally didn't know what to do with me. And my older boy is just like me. And there's times where I look at him and I see what he's doing. I think, oh God, that's so retarded. They're going to hate him at school. It's like, it's exactly what I did. So I do my best to help my boy out. He's got something I didn't have. He's got me to help guide him along. And I love him to death. The little one is super smart. Uh, yeah, you couldn't pull a fast one on him when he was still scooting on his belly. He always figured out what you were doing. I actually had to install a mechanical switch, with a key lock on a computer. I actually drilled a hole into a computer case, put an electrical bypass switch in that had a key so he wouldn't hit the power button to turn the computer off and on when his brother was watching TV shows on it or playing video games in the living room, because he'd do it just to make him scream. And I had to make it where he had to put the key in, turn it so he could hit the power button, and then put it back into neutral. So he figured out if he wanted to turn on the PlayStation, the automatic, I can't even remember the acronym. I don't shift gears fast. I don't remember the acronym at the moment, but the HDMI stuff would automatically switch on the TV, and it switched to the PlayStation. It'd make his brother scream with the same results. So, yeah, super smart and devious from the start. um, the gear shifting thing that I just told you about. I've got a genius level IQ, but I have learning issues and some other issues. So I did very poorly in school. School was all about memorize and regurgitate, and I can't do that to save my life. I scored very high in the sciences. I started out really slow in math, but as I grasped math and I got older, I did really well in it because I could figure things out. It wasn't a memorize and regurgitate thing. And because of that, turns out I'm the opposite of what my school liked to do. My school liked to get people to memorize things long enough to pass a test, so I made horrible grades. And my family very much judged me on it. I'm making sure I don't do that with my own children. I want to make sure that I address things properly. And one of those things that I have problems with is I don't shift gears well. If I'm focusing on wiring and I'm wiring up a panel and I'm troubleshooting, I'm trying to figure out where a fuse is wrong, I can do that very well for hours on end. But if in the middle of that you ask me a Unix command or even my own name, I might just freeze up and not be able to answer you. Whereas if I'm working at a Linux console all day, I can tell you all the commands just fine. But if you ask me where a fuse is located, I'm going to draw a blank for maybe 10, 15 minutes. I just don't shift gears that fast. So I don't even remember where I was going with this. I tend to ramble. This is one of the best things ever. I am awesome about rambling. And considering I didn't have anything directly mapped out, I think I've done a good job at it. Well, after NASA, I was actually jobless for maybe 2 days. My buddy had me hired at an advertising agency. And I really enjoyed my time there. That was probably the best job I ever had in my life. I told you earlier where I might have had some reactionary racism just because of where I grew up and how it was treated for being the white guy. That next company was so incredibly awesome. It was Hispanic people from Spanish-speaking countries all over the world. Even people from other countries that aren't really regarded as Spanish speaking. Like we had Hispanic Australians in there occasionally, and the less well-known Hispanics, we've had some Black Caribbean Hispanics in there, and all over South America. And it was easy to gain weight there. Everyone hugging was how they greeted you. I found that because I like to explain what I'm doing to people, and I didn't berate them. I became almost a king to them. I'm the IT guy that not only fixed things, I was the one who didn't make you feel stupid for having the problem. And I was very popular there. And unfortunately, and when they hired me, I was employee like 96 or 97. And they got up to nearly 300 employees. And by the time they laid me off, they were down to under 50. They lost their biggest clients and they were struggling to stay afloat. So I didn't take it too personally when they let me go. When I went back there they hired me to do some fiber after they laid me off. And I ran into some of the people I used to work with, and they were practically begging me to come back. It's like, not up to me. But my I was jobless for about 3 months, but this is where it got interesting. The place where I'm working now. Now you see the X-wing in the background. No, the place where I'm working now is a Spanish company that focuses on electrical work. So I went from one Spanish speaking company to another. And what's really screwed up is I don't speak Spanish. Even though I grew up in a Hispanic community and I've worked at two Spanish speaking jobs, I really don't speak Spanish. Part of the problem I told you where I'm kind of handicapped, even though I'm a genius, language is not my strong point. If I pay real close attention, I can sometimes understand Spanish. I can sometimes put a sentence together, and I can read it fairly well. But no, I've just never been able to pick it up. I have difficulty with language, so it was interesting. But I was hired for two reasons: for fiber optics and because I knew Linux. And I think they thought I was exaggerating in my resume because they told me they want me to be able to configure something if someone's talking to me over the phone. They didn't realize that you could hand me the keyboard and I could build the servers. And eventually that's what I started to do, and I'm configuring hardware and what have you. But early on, when they hired me, they didn't actually have anything for me to do yet. It's like they hired me before they needed me. So I wound up being used as a field hand where I was out proofing lines. I did a lot of hard work, that highway construction type work. But you know what? It fed my family, so I was okay with that. And during the course of that, actually for the first time in my life, got certified to drive a forklift. I'd done it before, but I never had a certification. I started to learn how to use man lifts that I'd never used before, and I started pulling trailers, which I'd done before, but I sucked at it. Now I'm good at it. And what this has done is it's improved my relationship with my father. My parents didn't know what to do with me. So considering I did go along on the tech side of things, and I may have to look at something. Give me a moment. Okay, that doesn't concern me. Um, I'm from an energy family. My mom's side was natural gas. My grandfather worked for Houston Natural Gas, which became Enron. My uncle worked there. On my dad's side, his grandfather was working in some of the early Standard oil fields back when they were still wooden derricks and covered and the whole 9 yards. And his dad worked for, my grandfather worked for Oxy Petroleum. When I was a child, my dad worked for Parker Drilling, so it was all oil on one side and natural gas on the other. I'm from an energy family, and here I am. I want computers. So they really didn't know what to do with me. Uh, but now that I'm working in a more industrial setting, I put on a hard hat, I put on high vis. If you go and you look through my profile on Mines, you'll see where I got stuck up in a bucket truck and made about a half dozen posts about getting rescued. They think it's the battery on down the line. You'll actually see, I post pictures from work on occasion. And now that I've got these sorts of things to talk about with my dad, it's actually really improved our relationship. There wasn't a lot of common ground between us. I mean, I've always liked my dad. We've always gotten along. But he always saw me as kind of weird because I didn't do what he did. I didn't want to be a cowboy, even though did ranch work. I never really considered myself a cowboy. Um, I just didn't want to be some drunken redneck out in the middle of the desert. So we had a hard time lining up, and this has really brought us closer together just because we can talk about so many industrial things. And I didn't realize how much that meant to him. Um, he's tried talking to some of my friends in the past, and they can just barely communicate. I guess just different worlds. But no, I've enjoyed this. I'm trying to get out of it now. That they're making me remote into a Windows machine to manage my Linux network now, and I can't properly support my client anymore. I have to leave this job because I'm proud of the work I do, and I cannot properly support them with the way they're making me support them now. So I started looking for a new job as soon as they rolled that out. I'm still looking for one now. I have a batshit crazy plan that I actually want to do, but it would take a lot of crowdfunding to get it off the ground. And I mentioned that I'm going to have a custody battle for my kids, so I don't know how practical it would be anyway. But I've actually thought about seeing if I could crowdfund an RV, one of the ones that they call it the toy hauler, the kind that's got a garage on the back. And I want to put a bunch of stage equipment in that garage, and I want to do something like a TED Talk setup. I actually have a lot of plans in mind to have other people do what I'm doing now, have a talk about what they do. It has to do with people that live outside the normal way of doing things, people who grow their own food, people who maybe build their own vehicles, make their own fuel. I want to interview people like that. I don't want to do left wing TED Talks, and there's some really, really good TED Talks. I wouldn't call it left wing. But I kind of want to do more of the do it yourself, live off the grid. I want to focus on people like that. I was thinking, man, if I could crowdsource an RV with a garage and a stage set up, and I could do webcast from all over the place, I would travel the United States on other people's dimes just to interview the people that need to be interviewed. And I think there's a lot of people on Minds. Several come to mind right ahead, or right now, off the top of my head, that need to give these talks. And I'm not just talking about Bill Ottman. I'm talking people in this, some of the few people watching this now. But that's kind of a crazy plan I have, and I guess I got to wait it out a little bit and see what happens divorce wise. I got into a dark place when that first started to happen. When I committed for life with no reservations. And when that rug got pulled out from under me, I didn't take it well. But I'm coming back around now and being strong and getting ready to move on. But I'm watching. Does anyone have any questions for me?
So, are you ready to do questions and answers?
Yeah, let's do that. I've been watching both rooms. Haven't seen much come up, but if anyone's got a question, yeah, ask away.
No, we got Karma Love on here, so I guarantee that she's got some questions for you, dude.
Uh,
Karma, if you want to unmute, you can unmute now.
Hi, guys.
Hey,
Hello.
Karma.
I was just going to ask you when you were talking about switching and doing your TED cast. Well, I have a few questions, but this one is the first one because you were saying like not the same thing, but I get what you're talking about. Have you been like researching people that you could possibly be interviewing? Because I know there's like a lady in California. She was harvesting like her own rainwater, stuff like that. And in your area too as well, just because like you have your cowboys and stuff like that. Would that be something that you would consider? Would it be more like, are you interviewing people that are like specialized in certain things, or people that kind of like you say they do things non-traditional, or are you? I know you're toying around with the idea. I was just curious.
Well, I'd actually thought about this a little bit. My thoughts: there are several people in this area that I would like to interview, and my thoughts were what I would do. First of all, I was going to create a group of people interested in this, and I was going to crowdsource some of this to them. And what I was going to do to generate interest is the first person to go up there and give one of those talks was going to be me. And what I was going to do with the talk was I was going to explain why I was called. I'm not revealing what I'm calling this.
Mm.
I was going to reveal what I'm calling it, why I'm calling it that, and what I'm going to do with it. And I was going to. I have an idea of doing the main talks and doing an EX version of everything. So the main talk is what's scripted. That's what's the equivalent to a TED talk. But then I was going to have additional content that would be more like a less formal documentary thing because when go to see one of these people, I'm going to be there a little while until I get up and go to the next one. And I figured, you know what, we can do a lot of video where they show us what they do and how they do it and have
Yeah.
formal EX things. And the EX things can even be unrelated things. I've got some other ideas in mind, depending on where things go with the boys in custody. I am active with my boys in Trail Life USA. And if you've never heard of Trail Life, it's a Boy Scout spinoff. Um,
Mm.
the problem with the Boy Scouts is they were a secular organization. And since they were a secular organization, they were open to government regulation and open to all kinds of lawsuits and what have you. And it really started about the time they forced them to let girls in. And it opened the door to more things. And right now, the Boy Scouts are nearly bankrupt because of how much kid diddling happened there.
Mhm.
And what happened is when they made the vote to basically allow gay scout leaders, there were people at the top who spun off a new organization called Trail Life USA. And they declared it a Christian organization, but it's non-denominational. And by declaring it Christian, they were able to make it boys only. They're able to be a little pick and choose a little more of who they want involved with it.
Mm.
My boys are heavily involved with it. And I was thinking, you know what? This winds up being a family road show. Now, I'd talk to the national leadership and see if I couldn't you know, get my have my boys still collect their branches if we went to like different trail life groups every time I parked the RV somewhere else. So I was thinking I could do like a secondary show that would have to do with the traveling, meeting all the different trail life groups and talking to the leadership and some of the boys there and doing a whole nother show that rides on the back of this one. Just because we'll do hike and bike trails everywhere we go and what have you. And I think I could do two or three shows just by moving this one RV around. Set up the stage for the official talk, do the backstage documentary, get to know you just YouTube thing, throw in the hike and bike trails and meeting the different trail life organizations. And you know what? Boy Scouts aren't a pariah. If I go someplace without actual trail life, I don't mind meeting some scout leadership. They're not a pariah, but we did separate from them. So I was thinking, you know what? I could totally work this out for them. And by the time they were done, my boys would have, they would qualify for some of the special badges for community projects and what have you, because we'd be making the videos. So yeah, I could totally see that working.
Okay, I have another question. Excuse me. And if you have more to talk about the show, you can. But I have another question in regards to the racism you said you experienced.
Yes.
So you said that when you were growing up, you were basically different from everyone around, which is not the first time I heard that about Texas. Because I had an acquaintance who was from Texas. He was from Wellington, and he used to work on a farm too as well. He used to say the same thing in regards that it was just it was really basically a place where a lot of Mexicans were at, and so there was always discrimination to where it would be more like even like the melanin and the white people might be closer, but even though too most melanin people had their issues. Now I would like to know what type of effect do you feel as though that racism that you experience may have had on you in regards to your interactions with people of, like, I know you said you have friends now or associates now that are Hispanic and they're really nice, or you work with a company and they were really humble and you guys got along well, which was different from your previous experience. But just on like a day to day basis, does it kind of trigger you when you go around people like that, or is it something that you've been able to kind of maintain or hold
Oh,
under
I haven't
control?
had a problem with it in many, many years.
Oh, that's good then.
As a matter of fact, even when it was still bad, I realized that not everyone was like that. I took a Mexican girl to prom.
Hmm.
I think that girl is great to this day. I mean, she's my age. I'm calling her a girl now, but no, I still talk to her on a
Unless she had
rare
to
occasion.
change, I think she's still a girl.
Yeah, but no, I realized that I was in a shithole, and I knew. My parents told me while I was growing up, if you leave, your problems don't go away. Your problems are a part of you, and you can't run away from your problems. And I'm sitting here looking around this shithole, saying, you know what? If I leave this place, 85% of my problems go away because they're walking around me. And guess what? When I left, 85% of my problems went away.
Right, though.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it really was a crappy place to live. And
The mentality was like weakening, and it was hurting you, affecting your energy. Right, I can totally relate.
yeah, I honestly think I qualify as an indigo child. If you looked into that,
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
and
I've
I
heard that.
have reasons beyond things I've talked about to say that. Um, one of my biggest flaws as a person is I see the best in everyone, and that is a personal flaw
Why do you consider it a flaw?
because I see what people are capable of, and I lock onto that because I see potential, I see what someone can do, and most of the time people just don't want to live up to their potential.
Hmm.
If you see someone who can do great things and you let them into your life so you can, work with them and make great things, they eventually screw you over and leave. Um, Most people don't want to live anywhere near their potential.
What do you think the reason is for that? Do you feel as though their reason for? Do you feel as though their reason is for being unable to live up to, unable or unwilling? Do you feel as though they're unable or unwilling?
Unwilling, but it's not just unwilling. I wish I could live 1,000 years because my eyes open so slowly to so many things. I think if people could live 1,000 years, a lot of the social problems we have would go away because we don't really live long enough to learn what we need to learn. Um,
Do you feel as though we could? Do you feel like living extended spans of life are is something that's possible?
Maybe. I'm not going to branch off into that right now, but
Hmm.
what I have learned is the psyops are real and they're everywhere. Um, I have learned the more TV someone watches, the less likely they are to be a go getter and less likely they are to get anywhere near their potential. And I'm not truly blaming TV for this in general. I enjoy relaxing with some scripted shows. By scripted, I mean fiction that was written to be watched as entertainment.
Hmm. Or
Pe-
recognizing the difference because now it's hard for people to separate reality from fiction. But yeah, okay.
But the people who watch reality shows that aren't reality,
I didn't understand
people
that.
who keep up with the Kardashians,
Mhm.
people who, watch TMZ and want to chase celebrities.
They forget their life.
Yeah, people who follow fashion. Like if you know what the trends are this year and why you shouldn't be wearing last year's clothes. The more shallow you get like that, the less you care about actually living up to greatness or doing what you can. You just want to keep up with the Joneses.
Right.
Um, yeah, so
So, do you feel as though it's been a crippling effect on you in regards to the type of opportunities you've given people that you've encountered that were unable to live up to their potential or your expectations? Also, too, do you feel as though it was their potential that you were actually seeing, or was it expectations of that person giving you the energy you could feel surrounding the being? And,
um, a little bit of all the above. I did a lot of this when I was younger, where I kind of taken it straight, if you kind of want to put it that way.
right.
And I learned to quit doing that. I, I I draw back a lot these days. I don't reach out to people like I used to because, first of all, I've had situations where people think I'm being conceited or whatever. You think you know more than everyone else. I actually had a guy at NASA that would just ask me question after question after question. I were in an L minus 14 or something like that. And
Just to see if he could catch you slipping. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah. Just that's the only reason, right? I know.
yeah, and there were times where I would say, I'm not sure, but I think. When I was wrong, he just completely,
Oh, yeah,
uh,
yeah.
yeah, I
He
mean,
broke. He ride off in the sunset with that. That was what he was waiting for the whole entire time.
yeah, I would actually, and I don't state something as a fact unless I know it as a fact. I will
Yeah,
say, I would assume that, or I will say, I am not sure, but this seems,
it's
or
quite
I think it
possible.
is.
It's highly likely. It's yeah,
Yeah,
something.
I
Yeah.
will make sure that I prefix an answer where I'm not certain with an uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. But
And
when it's certain, you'll speak it the same. Yeah, I get you. You'll speak it with certainty, so that way they can understand the certainty in regards to the situation because it's certain. Yeah.
right, and it's amazing how few people can grasp that concept. Uh, I have actually found I told you I have problems with language. That's one of the centers of my brain that doesn't work right. But
Do you understand? But it all bit si for the capito the capapupa I yeah almost get muta. But I guess I'm trying to figure. I'm attempting to figure out how to say it in English. In the middle of your head, there's a hole. You could feel like it. I'm asking you, do you you can understand all the Englishes, all the languages, but it just jumbles up together. Okay, anyway,
right,
I apologize.
All right.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
No.
no,
Okay.
okay, but yeah, but I actually do understand a lot, most of the nuance of English, and it surprised me how many native English speakers don't really understand the language once you get beyond TV.
Right. And then when you attempt to teach them, they look at you like you're insane. Like, hey, just look up that etymology, and they're like,
No.
because English is so broken.
I do have a thing that I do want to mention too that stuck out to me. Like, when you were talking about going to that vocational school and stuff for when you was younger,
Right.
that really stuck out to me too because like you were talking about being or working over in Tempe, and when I was younger, like in my teens, I used to live in Arizona, right there in Mesa, which is just next to Tempe,
Mm.
and
Just like
I haven't been to Phoenix and the surrounding areas in years now, but back when I lived there was back in the '90s, and I can agree with you on that. Like there was vocational schools everywhere out there. My friend Chris Wallace in high school literally went to a vocational school after school where he had learned, like you were talking about electronics, and he even got his hands into mechanics and stuff. And the thing I was wanting to ask you is, do you see a lot of those vocational schools just kind of vanishing over time, like not available to uh, even high school students? You know what I mean?
Okay. Well, let me tell you what I have seen. Uh, Obviously, High Tech Institute. It actually advertised on TV in Phoenix when I lived there. I remember when I was young, there was the Lincoln Tech commercials on all the time. There were ITT Technical Institute commercials on all the time. Then during the Obama administration, that all went away. But I have noticed a return of advertising for, is it ITT or Lincoln Tech? I've actually seen, at least during the Trump ad, I actually started to see some advertising come back for some of the tech schools once the administrations changed. Uh, I don't watch enough TV to actually know if any of them are advertising now or not. Most of my exposure to TV is usually when I'm visiting a relative, but I do pay attention to things like, hey, a tech school commercial again. Awesome. Um, Honestly, I don't know if any of them are advertising now again or not, but I have noticed they started to make a little bit of a comeback during the Trump advent. And I honestly don't know what they're doing now.
Yeah, because I was wondering that myself. That really stuck out to me. With I'd say at least right after Enron really is where I started noticing the drop offs when the Enron incident happened, and everybody was having problems. Well, the first time they were doing the stimuluses, you know what I mean? like right around that time period is when I started seeing these vocational schools just kind of vanish. And it used to be before then they were available. I mean, there were students going to high school who could go to them on the side after school for about 2 3 hours after school, and stuff like that. But you just don't see them no more.
I
And
will tell you, my roommate, when I was out in Arizona, actually dropped out of high school, and then went to the tech school and came out with an associate's but no high school diploma.
yeah,
And it's interesting, I talked about how crappy my school system was when I was growing up in it, but how it's better now. My niece and nephew are still in the same town where I grew up. Well, I guess my nephew might be out of it now, but he he got his associate's degree at the high school 2 weeks before he got his high school diploma, just by doing on-site classes. I said, damn, I wish that would have been available to me.
yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, he got his associate's degree first. But
Uh,
if I was him, I'd have gone ahead and finished out too if it was only 2 or 3 weeks. So.
I see that too with like this generation. They've got their problems, but one thing that I do have to say, with me and my brothers and sisters, the best we did was like GEDs and stuff. We weren't really school material, but I look at these kids in my family now, and every single one of them graduated. And not only did they graduate, but they graduated with straight A's. But even there, I mean, it raises different questions for me because, like, when I was growing up, it was always talked about the dropouts, right?
Right.
But now I'm starting to see that it's not just dropouts in school, like high school and, stuff like that. But what about the students who graduate with straight A's who just drop out? You know what I mean? Like, they have the potential to make something out of themselves by going to college and wherever else they want to do, but they just decide they're not going to do anything. Um, have you
Perhaps they learn.
ha,
Perhaps they learn.
have you learned or have you seen that as you were just basically getting older and seeing it from the younger ones where they do that they do great in school, but the moment they graduate, they don't want to do anything. They don't want to progress any further than that. They did their time. They're done.
I actually have seen a little bit of that. One, a friend of a relative comes to mind who actually did want to do more school. She went to school and got a pretty good degree, left school and went to work at a coffee shop. It's like, why would you waste all your time getting a degree if you're just going to go to work at a coffee shop? Uh, there is a man in the town I live in now, kind of a different story. He got a pretty good degree and he mows lawns for a living. Turns out he makes more money mowing lawns than he would using his degree. I'm in a special place myself. That tech school I went to, I came out with an associate's. All I've got's an associate's. I'm meant to go back to school and get a little bit higher. My plan, I had a good plan. My plan was to go to school, get a job, pay off what I already had, go back to school and get a higher degree. Well, my first wife kind of had a problem with that. And she made sure I never got back on track again. I could have got back on track, but then I got married again, so I guess I'm stupid, whatever. But no, I never could get back on track to get a higher degree after that. So, and my plan totally didn't work out. And it turns out it's an issue now. As you can tell by listening to me, I have an incredibly broad base of knowledge. There's not much I can't work on. I'm, a junior pro bicycle mechanic. I can work on regular cars. I do Unix, I do Windows, I do Novell, I do Mac. I can wire, I can do fiber optic cabling and terminate it. I do mil spec cables most people have never heard of, coax. I can actually do a lot of the engineering, even though I'm technically not an engineer. I work on high voltage. I'm I can do an electrician's work. I'd still have to have a licensed electrician sign off on it. But I'm an electrician without being able to call myself one. I'm an engineer without being able to call myself one. When it comes time to get a new job, all you got's an associates. This guy over here who doesn't know half what you do with a bachelor's, yeah, we're going to hire him instead. When they hire people with bachelor's degrees where I work, guess who trains them? Oh, yeah, it's kind of. I refer to the college system now as the education mafia. You have to pay the Don by going to school to get the job. And it really doesn't have anything to do with ability or skill level. It has to do with paying the Don. So,
Yeah, kind of. That's kind of what my big worry about that whole situation is, because like I've got really good or really smart nephews and nieces, but I just don't think they understand that concept. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's people out there that are just going to freaking hire you off your paperwork. I mean, if you haven't got the ability written on paper, there's just some people that aren't going to hire you. Like with your story, you worked yourself up. You did the deal each step of the way. You know what I mean? But they don't even do that anymore. Like, even in a truck driving job, you can't be grandfathered in anymore. They just don't tolerate that. You know what I mean? I know that because my family has basically come from nothing but truck drivers mostly, and that's just truck driving. So
Will you
that's
drive big trucks,
not,
18 wheelers?
yeah. Well,
That's what Papa drives.
I
Well, he
used to.
used to.
I
Yeah.
used to. I can't cope with that stuff no more. That's for the big dogs.
But you were saying like how people kind of phase out of that type of stuff. It's because a lot of the times we're learning, well, people are in general are learning that the system is really rigged. Like the United States is a corporation, it's not a country, and it literally we're their employees and they're set to monitor us, and that's why they're able to have a different set of rules and a different set of laws. So the truth of the matter is it really is not that they're just like not living up to their potential. Perhaps they're facilitating it one of their own, because right now sustainability is going to be more important than academic acquisition, just because nothing is unknown to the mind. Knowledge is the foundation of all things in existence. Education is actually the act of bringing out of the mind. So it's already there. Educa is the root word of that, and it means to bring out of. So people are actually learning more, just different aspects, as opposed to folding to quote unquote the man. They're actually becoming the man. And so I think it's more that what we're experiencing, less than people just kind of giving up on themselves. But it's yet to be like publicized or embraced, because people see it as a weakness, like, oh, you're just lazy, or oh, you don't want to do this. But it's like, really, you're being controlled by a system that's set out to kill you, to destroy you. I was asking if you felt like we could live longer and you felt like you needed 1,000 years. Well, what if you could live 1,000 years? There's stories of people that were able to live ages. How come we're not able to? It's because we've been calcified. In order for us to be able to recreate this type of existence, we would have to become decalcified of our pineal gland. And that's just a whole different talk. But I was just saying, like, I'm listening to you talk about how you would like to branch off and do something different. I'm sure if you had the opportunity, or if it was more open to where doing the podcast, traveling podcast, was something you were shown in school, like as a trade or just as an option, given that an option, you would have probably that would have latched onto you then. You would have saw it then. It was like, oh, wow, that's a really good idea. You might have not ever made it to NASA, but you might have been world renowned doing something you're passionate about. And a lot of the times right now, we're not even given an opportunity to excel in our passions, because, like you were saying, you have to have that paper that says you paid the money. But I mean, if that's the case, then you're not really being yourself. And so you'd rather hire someone that's not authentic in order for you to be able to say they did this. And how do you know that they did not pay somebody like AI to do their entire college career for them? And now they work for you and they're idiots. because they had no experience. They literally just typed some stuff into a computer, and this is what presented their diploma. And now, as a result, they look at you like you're clueless because they never really did the work. Whereas someone that knows what they're talking about may not have it written down on paper, but can prove that they know what they're talking about, show you in live action what they're doing. That's unacceptable because, well, you didn't pay the money to pretend that you know what you're doing. That's weird.
Uh, Let me talk a little bit. I just sent Roger a private message with a link, and I have come up with a new way to address my employability, and I don't know if it's going to make a difference or not. But I had an idea. I told you I worked for a marketing company for a while, and I saw some of the resumes that came in, creatives trying to get hired, and they would make works of art, and they would send them in to the company because hey, it's a creative type company. They want creative people. Well, that kind of inspired me, and I had an idea for if I can get an interview with a company I'm actually interested in, I'm going to hand them a book. I'm actually going to hand them. Uh, let me. I need to turn off this. Let's see if I can turn off this background thing. Hide selfie. No, I'd probably have to leave and come back in.
It's okay. Just
But yeah, I actually this is a first draft of a new resume that I'm doing.
all right.
I'm actually making a book that has that's why I'm not sharing it to everyone. There's personal info in here, like contact info.
Yeah.
But I'm actually handing out a book if I get an interview, so they can actually see pictures of my work. And I totally shouldn't have set that X-wing background. I don't know if y'all can see it or not, but
Oh yeah, it's cool.
yeah, I sent you Roger. I sent you the actual PDF of it that Google gave me after I printed out my first draft. That's the first draft you're looking at. That's not one I'm going to hand out. There's things I need to fix.
That's pretty
But I
amazing.
knew I had to print one before I could find out my mistakes. So I'm one of those that I can look at the original pieces 900 times, but until I throw the switch, I'm not going to get it all. So I knew I was going to have to spend some money and print one if I was going to get it right.
Now,
I'm one of those people that I've been building computers.
before we go on, can I ask you if you give me permission, can I go through and check all this out? And then, like, if there's things that are interesting to me, do you think maybe at a later time we could sit down and discuss it like we're doing now?
Sure, I covered most of what's in there, just babbling on.
Well,
You might
you
find something in there you like a little better.
yeah, but you were talking before about being a little bit more organized too, and like if I find something like that, we could like have like an entire conversation on just that topic. You know what I mean?
Right.
Something like that. You know what I mean? Because I mean, that'd be cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you give it a look over, you'll probably find some interesting stuff.
Okay.
And I do know there's a little bit in there I didn't really cover. Well, what's interesting about this resume book? Um, I used to do family photo albums. Last year was the first one. I hadn't done one in a long time because of what happened. But I found that if I made a Google photo book of the previous year's activities and I gave them to grandparents and what have you, they absolutely loved it. And I was thinking of those photo books, and it's like, you know what? I'm going to make one of those as a resume. And what was interesting is there's a 20-page minimum. I ran out of resume making about 10 pages in. So I started just adding a little bit of extra about what I do, about my hobbies, and what have you, so they got to know me a little bit better. And I tried to keep it at least half-ass professional anyway. But since I had to add a bunch of filler, I decided to make some filler that just kind of relayed who I was. So you might actually find some good stuff in the back. I got pencil scrawl all over the physical copy about notes about what I need to change before I make an official one. But yep, that's the prototype I sent you a link to.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I I I really enjoyed everything you said here. And like especially when you was talking about the stuff in Arizona because like that's real life to me because I was 13 when we moved from Florida, which I was talking to Karma about the other night, to Arizona, and that was like an entire different universe. You know what I'm saying? I was going from running all around barefooted to freaking not being able to run barefooted in Arizona. You know, you don't.
Step on the cactus.
Yeah, and those rocks don't feel good when it's 104 degrees outside. You know, I remember the first time I tried it. I was trying to run across the street because we lived out in the desert on a dairy farm, and I was going to check the mail, and just going outside of where we lived and crossing the road, man, it tore my feet up. I never did it again. You know.
Well, I'm going to tell you something you may not believe. Uh, Growing up in West Texas, I was in the Chihuahua Desert, and I never could figure out um, why the Chihuahua Desert and what was it, the Sonora Desert were different deserts. And it turns out, after having lived in both, yeah, they're different deserts. They're completely different. But I grew up in the Chihuahua, and Pecos was in a plains area. It was flat land for miles and miles, but we were surrounded by mountains. Basically, the Guadalupe Range forked in Mexico. And to the east of us were the Davis Mountains, and to the west of us were, I don't remember what they're called in the U.S., but it was northern Guadalupe's, just crossing over the border. And then the Permian Basin, once you got close to Odessa, it was still plains, but you actually went to a continental plate, and there was an elevation change from one plane to the next because literally there was a fault line there, and the area we were in was quite a bit lower than it was to the north, and it created a bowl effect, kind of like Mexico City has. And we had a microclimate, and I'm going to tell you, it got hotter in the summer in Pecos than Phoenix did. And the people in Phoenix didn't believe me when I told them that. But I told you it was kind of a backwoods podunk place. It got up to 128 one summer while I was growing up there. And it's not officially recorded anywhere because the closest weather station was in Kermit, and Kermit didn't get that hot. No, they was to the north a little bit. You know, now Pecos was a microclimate, and it had a caliche-based soil. So the soil would radiate heat all night long. It never cooled off there just because the ground set kept radiating it. It's kind of like heating up a brick and how the or a rock and it just stays hot even after the heat goes away. That was the whole town. And no, it got up to 128 one summer while I was growing up there. And when I picked cantaloupes, it was commonly 115, 116 all day. And that was just normal to us there. But I will say, I do believe it was sun cycles because the extremes Pecos experienced while I was growing up there, it was colder in the winter too, by the way. It would get really cold in the winter and really hot in the summer. It just had to do with the exposure and the bowls set up. But it hasn't been to those extremes since the late 90s. The past 25 years, it's evened out a lot. And I think the same is true in a lot of places. They're trying to brainwash us into thinking it's the hottest it's ever been, but I've seen hotter. I mean, I've experienced hotter, and they are pulling psyops on us right now. But it was hot there, and it's evened out a lot now, and it might be a little bit hotter this year than the last couple of years, but that's weather. Yeah, the people in Phoenix didn't believe me.
Well, I know that when I was living there, there was a lot, or in Arizona, the the thing that I loved the most about it was the desert in the mornings. You know, like when you woke up in the mornings, it there, there's no other experience than living in the desert and waking up at like 7 o'clock in the morning to go to school. I mean, like the dew in the air, and like cactuses when they freaking, what do they call that? It's that stuff that comes out whenever they're trying to freaking mate with other
Pollen.
yeah,
Yeah.
pollen. The pollen in the air, man. There's days where that pollen was about the size of a freaking snowflake. You know what I mean? And I mean, just beautiful stuff. Those are the memories that I had of living out west that I really did like. You know.
Pecos really didn't have many cactus. We had a lot of mesquite. We had a lot of desert plants, a few cactus all around us. You go to Fort Davis, you know, you had what if you headed east or if you headed west, you got cactus. But out where we were, there just really wasn't a lot. You'd see occasional ones, but it was weird. We lived in a nearly cactus-free zone, surrounded by cactus. It never made sense to me.
Yeah, I also want to mention too to Carmen or Karma that
Yes.
I closed off the chat on the side, and like whenever you were doing the chat stuff in there, that's actually pretty cool that you did that because I mean, like that's gonna be awesome on the video because we're getting like the messages popping out on the side.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I figured it would be easier so I was not interrupting and then I could still voice what I was saying without it being disturbing.
I
Video
like it
wise,
too,
that's
by the way.
awesome.
Yeah,
No,
unfortunately,
I,
I've been watching other notices since work environment. I got to see what they're talking about. But
Well, I mean, if you guys are done, man, we can put an end to it and everything. And I really enjoyed this. You know, I thought that I thought that you presented yourself excellently. To be honest with you, I mean,
thank you.
yeah, I like your vulnerability. I really respect your openness to be able to disclose the
now
information that you do.
now before
Um,
we go though, what I would like is if you have anything, if you want to make a plug for yourself, basically, um, like
I think I pretty much covered it within the interview itself.
you got any social medias that you want anybody
Mine's
to?
is pretty much my major hangout. I've kind of had a Mexican standoff going on Facebook. I haven't participated much in over a year, mostly because of the thing falling apart with my wife.
Yeah,
I wish I could talk about that. I really do.
you
I,
said
I could give an interview far better than this one, just talking about my personal life over the years on things that I skipped.
yeah.
Do you
And I'm
have any
telling you, it would
investments?
sail in the steamy fiction section if I really anonymized it. But yeah, I have to leave most of that out, and most of that's distant past. After my first marriage, I was married to a sociopath, and it was really, really bad being married to a sociopath. And in response to that, I did a few underhanded things, just kind of self defense.
Hmm.
And as time went on, I looked back at it. I told you I grew up in Sunday school and what have you, and I've learned to take the high road always. I never wanted to slip back into what I did to basically have to defend myself against a sociopath. I've learned to take the high road always. I am very honest. I make I don't lie to a fault, and my honest the way I present myself is I'm just going to tell you how it is. I'm honest about everything. As I've tried to explain to my kids, if you lie to someone, you have to keep track of who you gave what lie to. I actually heard it explained recently as in the truth just is. but a lie takes energy. When you tell a lie, you have to continue to put energy into it. I don't want to keep up with all that, So yes, I have taken a path in life of absolute honesty, and it's actually part of what's caused my divorce. And
Well,
I
I'm
look
glad
at it.
I'm glad you did share what you did share, because I mean that was real. With I think if people couldn't relate to that, then they're just not human. You know, I mean, really, it's you said enough to where you made your point.
Yeah,
You know.
Yeah,
yeah.
no, you
If
were
I had
very
to go back and if I could tell some lies to keep my marriage together, I wouldn't. And it's
mm,
not because I didn't value my marriage. It's that,
you value yourself.
yeah, exactly.
That's what happened with me and mine. Not to compare stories and say, but I'm just saying it's you're in a safe space because I completely understand. I was married for 10 years and I never saw divorce at all, and like so. But when you start becoming who you're supposed to be and you start being honest about who you're supposed to be and what's happening and paying attention to what's going on around you, it just creates a whole completely different reality. And in most cases, it's not the one you had in the present. So I understand.
I try to live in the real reality, and I seek the truth in all things. And I can't live a lie. And I don't think most people have achieved anything near wanting to live in a reality on that level.
It scares them. They're intimidated by having to do the work within themselves because what if they don't like what they see? But it so will live this illusion and pretend that it's real and definitely the standard as opposed to actually doing the inner work to be able to create the truth because the truth is present. We're just ignoring it. And it's
Yes.
just
Oh, well, the thing is, you don't create truth. The truth
well,
just
you
is.
create reality in general just from your
Right.
thoughts, but I mean, it's the truth of that. I mean, truth is based off of who you are. I mean, like
Right.
you're creating yourself, but if you've been in illusion, you have to create the truth because all that's been created prior to you actually accepting the truth is an illusion. So it is a form of creation, but it's just the recreation of actual self or the establishment of the creation of self and this the separation of the illusion. So you're right, you're not creating it because it's always been, it's your foundation, but at the same time you have not been harvesting it, nurturing it, or growing it, so it's just kind of been laying dormant and now you have to bring it to life.
Hey Carmen, you keep talking. I'm gonna make you do an hour interview like I'm doing with him. So just
Now, I'm
I'll
going to go
stop
ahead and
talking
take
now.
off, folks.
No, let me
okay.
shut up.
It takes me over an hour to get home from work. And honestly, sitting here a little extra is not so bad. 'Cause I spend less time on the road if I leave later. I mean, instead of spending an hour and a half to get home, now I can spend an hour and 10 minutes getting home. I'd rather sit here and talk to you than sit in traffic. So,
Yeah.
Your show was great, like your interview, and it was just informative. And then for you to talk about the reverse racism thing, it's kind of like it's just right on time. See, I grew up. My mom's a doctor. I grew up around all white people in New Jersey, so racism is not something I really become accustomed to, except for like internet bullies, and then like and even in Florida, I live here in Florida, and people always talk about the Spanish people, but the Spanish people embrace me. They cook for me. They are very nice to me. They watch my kids like when I'm out and about and making friends and social and not in my I'm going right now, so I'm kind of nurturing self mode. So that's why it's just like it's just bizarre to me. So I kind of react like are you kidding me? Because like literally I'm babysitting for Dr. Levin, she's Jewish, and then Dr. Spinosi, and like these people who they're not looking at me like, oh, you're a melanin lady or a black girl or God forbid the N word. They're like, that's Dr. Palmer's daughter. And so it's just I don't know. I take real offense to it, but I appreciate you being able because I like even Roger. He was explaining to me a lot of people they don't understand because they grew up in different areas, and so for me, it's just like, well, why are you acting like this? We're all people because where I grew up, we're just people, and like for me, very well off people at the time. So it's just I don't know. It's just so different now, though.
now, I've, I'm probably not going to find myself another white American woman. I've made that mistake twice. Oh,
Women.
I don't want to laugh too hard because then now I'm being offensive. But
the,
that was
the
kind of
only
funny.
the only thing that that's different between the women you found and the women I found is you married them. All right, that's
Right.
it. I've been single all my life, and I came close once, but she almost killed me. So
Oh my.
So
I
there are knife scars on my arms from where the first one tried
yeah.
when I was playing dodge the knife. She was going for my neck, and I did like this, and yeah, I got serration marks. Here's from the serrated edge she tried to use.
So before we start digressing, let's go ahead and end this,
Yeah,
guys.
that guy like looked back for a second. I was like, whoa.
I
Yeah.
love having you guys on here. This makes the second one that we've all done together, and it both of them has been successful. And I would love to have you come back because okay, I'll say that eventually, right? How did you say it again? Pecos,
Pecos. Yeah,
Pecos,
I'm going to spell out uh, how it's pronounced by the locals.
Pecos. Okay, gotcha.
I keep
That's
hearing pay cuts every time he said, but so I just take the, yeah,
yeah.
pay cuts.
Did you hear me give the original pronunciation earlier, Karma?
Yeah, I've been here since 6. So yeah,
Oh,
and
yeah,
when you, yeah, and why you were named it because not a lot. There was some guy who wasn't really from your city. He named himself that. So he was like, "But I'm
yeah.
really from there," and you
It
haven't
was
had
a
any
tall
issues
tale
with
of
your name.
Pecos Bill. Pecos Bill is like Paul Bunyan or something like that. If you look up the stories of Pecos, Disney actually did some short cartoons, and there was other cartoons from the 30s and 40s based on him. But he's a tall tale. Compare him to Paul Bunyan or what was the railroad guy? John Henry.
Yeah,
Mm.
So it was one of those things.
but
All right,
yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and take off because I got some driving to do, folks.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will see you later, Karma. I want to
I'll see you
thank
tomorrow.
everybody for joining again, and I'm gonna end it right here.
Good night.